Hello and welcome to Julie Hall Designs. Today I'm going to take you through how to create this magnificent stained glass table runner. It is just stunning and it was all done in multiple hoopings that join up to match perfectly all within your machine. Okay, let's have a look at what we need to get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is set my design up. Now, you can see here I've got my design in my hoop. I've got my fabric in my hoop and I've got the design loaded on. Now there's actually, to save time and space, I've actually got two separate designs here that I've merged into one. Depending on your hoop size, you can choose to do the same thing. If you have a smaller hoop size, it is exactly the same. It is just going to take more steps. So the first colorway that I'm going to stitch out is going to show where we are going to place our mylar. And in this instance, mylar is being used to give the glittery effect underneath. Now what you're going to see here is the three different designs that I've merged together as it creates the outline. So that would be design 1, we've then got design 2, and I've merged them together just to make my job a little bit easier. Now Mylar is of course the iridescent film, and iridescent embroidery film is the other thing that I call it, that you can purchase from our store, and it gives your design that glittery look. And for these stained glass projects, it actually makes it look like you have used, or like there is sunlight shining through behind the design. Now I'm going to take my mylar and lay it over that design. And we want to stitch out colorway 2, and that's going to hold that mylar in place. And while it's stitching that out, I just want to show you, I've got my thread colours laid out here. So you can see, I'll just make it easier for you to see. These are the colours that I am using through my design. There's about 15 all in all, and instead of using black lead, I like to use, I should probably use the full one, a silver metallic, and I use Kingstar metallic thread. Now that is also available through our website, and it is the only metallic thread that I do use. It is a metallic thread that is wrapped around a polyester core, and it is the thread that frays the least. When I was doing the sample for this panel, I think my thread might have broken twice on the entire 1 meter panel. Once you've got that Mylar laid down, it is really just a case of stitching out the rest of the colours. Now, the way the stitches are going to form is that they are going to be quite open. Having said that, there is a lot of stitches within the design. This is supposed to take 153 minutes, which is an awful lot of time for you guys to be watching. So I am going to fast forward this for you so that you can see the overall effect that we get. Okay, so all of the stitching has now been completed, and what we are up to is adding in the stained glass effect, which realistically is just another set of stitching. I'm turning over to my metallic thread, which, as I mentioned before, is Kingstar metallic, which we sell on our website at Julie Hall Designs. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to slow the speed of my machine down to 500 or 400 stitches a minute, just to give the stitches time to really form well around the design. So as you can see here, our stitching is completed, and what I now need to do is come through and prepare this design for the next part of the stitching, and this is going to be where we match up. So here I am just removing the excess stabilizer. This is going to be where we match up this part of the design, almost like a puzzle, as we stitch out our second layer. And the preparation for doing that is all around trimming correctly. And when I say correctly, what I'm doing here is with a very sharp, small pair of scissors, I am coming through and I am cutting very close to the design without cutting through any of the stitches. So you can see here, and what I'm going to do is just cut around as we go. But you want to be incredibly close as close as you can. Now, the design will retain its stiffness just because there's so many stitches, plus our stabilizer, plus the Mylar. And take your time with this. It doesn't have to be done in the hoop. it is just getting it all together so that it is ready when you've got that last set, or when you're up to the last design on the second stitch out. And spending a little bit of time here will ensure that you save time when it comes to putting the entire piece together. And you only want to trim up to the straight edge of the design. So I'm just going to come across here . And what you can see now is that that is beautifully and closely trimmed. The other thing that we need to do before we can put it all together is to make it easier to hold all of these little sticky out pieces in the correct position. I use my double-sided no heat basting tape, and I just come through, and what I'm looking to do, or to try and do here, is to place the tape where the stitches are not going to go. So I'm not going to be gumming up my needle, and all I want to do is come through along the edges of the design. And I prep this now, but I don't take the tape backing off until I'm ready to actually use it. So we know that we're only going to be stitching, or satin stitching, along these areas. So nowhere that I've placed the tape is it actually going to gum up. Okay, so I've now got my tape all along the back there. Now I'm going to set this aside whilst I start the exact same process again of laying down the mylar and stitching the colours, and I want to stitch all the colours until I get to the silver. And when we get there, I'm going to show you exactly how we put these pieces together. Okay, so we've completed our second design up to the last colourway. What I'm now doing is just coming through and removing any excess Mylar or iridescent embroidery film from where I'm going to attach those two designs. So this is going to be our attachment area, and if you remember from earlier, this is going to be the piece that I attach, and I can see I've got just a tad more trimming, and it's okay to do that little bit more tiny trimming as you go. So what I now want to do is come through and remove the backing pieces that we had on that tape. It does take a little bit to make sure you're removing the paper and leaving the tape there. Okay, so that is all my backing removed, and now I can come through and start to carefully put the puzzle that is this design together. Now I start with the pokey outy pieces just because they are the simplest to place. And sorry, I realise you might have trouble seeing over my fingers here. Now, don't worry too much if it feels like you're warping this around a little. Remember that the hoop is not remember that the fabric is not totally flat, and you have the ability as we go along to then move individual segments as well and just place them more securely. So now that we've got that first part done, we come through and we start our last colorway, which is going to add in all of the silver. When I am using when I'm looking at a metallic thread, and you could use either metallic or black, I just love the elegance that metallic gives this. The only metallic that I will use is Kingstar metallic. To me, it is the best, and it is the best at non-shredding. I have now done, this will be my second panel in this, and I think I've had one thread break along the way. So I'm fairly happy at that. So let's come over and get stitching again. So what I am looking for as this stitches is just that best join possible. So you can see it's going to do a centre line and then a zigzag, and then it's going to do the satin stitch. Now, even though we've stuck those areas down, we do want to keep watching this and making sure that none of the pieces pick up. And you can see that I've slowed my machine down to give it the best chance at those perfect joins. the way that the design has been created is so that the edges of the joins merge over one another to make it pretty on the edges in much a similar style as real stained glass would have. And what you can see here is my completed panel. Once you've got the first panel completed, you're going to go through and complete the second side, which is exactly the same as the first, but it has been reversed. Now we've done that for you on the panel, and that is pieces 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and then 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. So now we are on to piece 11, and piece 11 is the piece that is going to come through and join both of these into our centerpiece. So once again, I have very closely trimmed up all of the edges of our designs. I am going to come through and use the double-sided no-heat basting tape along the back edges, and I'm going to stitch out all of piece 11 up until the last colour. Alrighty, so as you can see here, this is the final design, and I've stitched it up to the last colourway as we've done with all the other designs, and now I'm just going to remove that excess Mylar or iridescent embroidery film. Now, number of sheets that I've used for this project, I have used 2 sheets and I still have a little bit left over. So it's actually quite economical. If you give a lot of sort of wastage on the sides, you may need that 3rd sheet. And once I've got my project here and ready, I come through and you can see I've already added the tape on. So now I'm going to remove the backing. Carefully, of course, so that I don't pull off the actual tape with it. And if the sticky does come off, just replace it down, press it down hard and try again. Okay, so which direction is which? This one's going to go in this direction, and I gather my points. Just want to make sure here that I've set that down as well as I can, and then we do the same thing on the other side. Now, when you are stitching the silver onto this final one, you are going to have all of that bulk inside the arm of the machine. So I am going to roll mine up and hold it together with some of my stabilizer wrap bands, and I'll show you how I do that in a second. Let me move this so this side is more centered. And remember, if we need to adjust that around a little bit, that's all fine. And now we are ready to stitch. So to roll this side that's going to sit in the arm of the machine up and avoid it sitting on top of itself, all I'm going to do is roll it up and then, using my stabilizer wrap band, come through and hold it down. And that's just the perfect way to keep that out of the way whilst we stitch. And then we'll continue stitching that until all of the design is completed. And what we then have is a beautiful completed table runner. Now, of course, the next thing I've got to do is put the binding on it, and then we're going to quilt around the edges with our embroidery machine to finish it off. So the first thing I've done here is trimmed to 1/4 inch past the stitching. I have then cut strips of my border fabric, and I've just chosen, I think it's called Fairy Frost in yellow, because I really love that yellow colour just there. And I've cut 4-inch strips. I'm going to start by going side to side and then top to bottom, attaching the strips to the panel. So our borders have all been placed on, and what I've now got is my backing fabric, my wadding, and my beautiful table runner. Everything is smoothed out. What I'm now going to do is take my quilt screen there. I'll do it from this side. So about a hand's width apart, just to hold everything together as we quilt. Now you'll notice that my backing fabric is about 4 centimetres or 1 3/4 inches maybe larger on each side than my actual panel. That is done deliberately so that I can have it in secured to the hoop as we quilt. And last one. Now, here I have my quilting design that I'm going to use, and I've chosen a feather design to emulate the stitching and the curves that are coming around here within the panel. So what I need to do is measure the width of my border, which after I've taken out, so initially we were 4 inches, and of course now that we have attached that, that's now come down and we are at about 3.5 inches. So if I look at the center line being, and taking into account as well that I'm going to want to leave a little bit of space to bind, I'm going to come through and draw a line 2 inches in and use that as my center point down my panel. So if I come through and draw that line, and then I am going to quilt down the panel. Now, this design is not a cornered design, and depending on which size project you make, your panel is going to be a slightly different size. So my focus is to stitch completely down each side, and then I am going to put a single quilting design in the cross sections. Okay, let's get quilting. So what you can see here is I have the inside of my regular hoop attached, and I've attached it with magnets. Now we've done a couple of videos showing how we do that, so I'm not going to show you that one. What I've done on my screen is set the design. When you load the design into your hoop, it comes to the middle. When you move to the first stitch, it takes you to that first stitch. And for my design here, the first stitch is going to be right in that center line that we have drawn. I've also marked up where the middle of my hoop is. And what I'm doing is I am taking a magnet back here So here you can see the finished project. What I am loving is how the quilting really brings out and emulates the curves that are in the stained glass project. I have used in this particular example the 23 centimetre design or 9-inch, and it has given me a finished and completed project which is 1.14 metres wide or 45 inches. The perfect size as a lovely dramatic table runner or even a bed runner. These stained glass projects also look brilliant on the wall in a medium lit area where they will catch a little bit of a light to give the impression that you have a window somewhere. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this foray into stained glass embroidery and that you will give it a go. Please check out our designs on julieHallDesigns.com, and until next time, have a stitching day. Bye.